Hey there, and thanks for checking out episode 121 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. My name is Greg Lindberg. Here on this episode, we are visiting with a young lady from the Los Angeles, California area. And she has a yoga business in which she works with many different clients, including those who are blind or visually impaired. So let's go ahead now and dust off the old yoga mat and start stretching toward episode 121 of the Eyes Free Sports podcast. Okay, so my guest here on this episode of Eyes Free Sports is Sonya Chapnick. And Sonya is a certified yoga therapist, the founder and CEO of Yoga Gently, and an all-around disability and health and wellness advocate. Sonya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Greg. It's wonderful to speak with you again, and I am grateful to be here.
Awesome. Appreciate you taking the time, and I know you have listened to some of my episodes, so really appreciate the feedback you've given on those, and thank you for being a listener as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we need lots more outreach and connection for those of us that want to be involved and active in life.
No doubt. That's definitely my mission, so you summed it up well there. So why don't we just kick things off here, Sonya, just with your background as far as where you're originally from in your early years.
Yes, thank you. So originally I'm from the East Coast, born in Boston, and growing up was not easy. We moved around a lot, and I would say kind of had an unstable and a little bit tumultuous youth. But because of that, I think it really helped me understand and be exposed to many different types of people and types of circumstances. And I was able to understand that we are not defined by our circumstances. And the things that I carry with me today that are very important in my own youth were being outdoors, being in Massachusetts and being kind of exposed to places like Walden Pond and the Cape and gardening and things like that gave me a real connection to what's important as far as nature and how nature actually can provide a lot of comfort and solace if need be. And so that sort of created a connection to environmental science, which is something that I have deep passion for. And I think the other piece of growing up and being moved around a lot, because I was between the ages of, say, 12 and 14, we probably moved 5 times. So in that, I think I was a very shy child, and I also was, I think all middle-aged school kids are awkward anyway. But I think for me, I was teased a lot, I was bullied. And because of that, I was able to kind of build my own strength around going inward. And I think those two pieces, being outside and overcoming some of the adversity that I was experiencing as a kid, kind of carried through to where I am today and what I'm committed to when I work with each and every person and how I connect with other people in general. Or there's kind of a depth that can come from the connection of that.
Right. Interesting. I appreciate you kind of laying that foundation, and that's such a great point about kind of the tween/teen years. There's a lot of change going on already in us at that time in our lives. To move around, have that much transition in your life, which it sounds like you had, I'm sure, presented a lot of opportunities, but also challenges as well, would you say?
Absolutely. And, in growing up, I think there's a key to, especially nowadays, kids have a sense of connection through our internet, and the exposure that kids have now is very different from when I was growing up. So I think the pieces of nature and having personal and interpersonal connections makes a big difference also. And so moving through into the more adolescent years and gaining those kinds of skills, the skill set that's required to move forward from adolescence into adulthood is important, to understand what brings us joy and what creates passion in us and what we can rely on for our own sense of safety, first of all, and the way to design what's next. Because a lot of kids don't know what's next. And it's very difficult to move, to even understand, to get the large picture of life. And as an older adult, it's even hard to do that. So I think each and every opportunity and experience is actually a moment for growth.
Sure, sure. Very powerful, but I really like how you're communicating that and saying that. So in terms of your visual impairment, I understand you didn't start losing your vision until kind of early adulthood, into your adult years. So prior to that, as far as your education, career, anything you'd like to mention on those fronts?
Yeah, so in high school, I was a really good student, and actually all through elementary and middle school, I was a really good student. Luckily, was able to have deep interest in a lot of different things. And, like I mentioned earlier, I like nature, and I had really good connection with science. And then I also loved art and mostly photography. So I carried those with me through college. I love to sew, so I also learned how to be very creative and expressive through fabrics and things like that. So in college, I was part of the costume shop.
Hmm.
I was a photographer, and I was a scientist. I was really into biology. So I majored in college in biology and had these passions. Luckily, I was able to go to a liberal arts college. And those things helped gear me towards when I finally was able to find a job. I worked as, in the corporate world, I worked as an environmental biologist.
Hmm. Interesting.
And yeah, and so it was a great experience. I got to do a lot of outdoor activities as, some of our field work, and we were very responsible for environmental permitting and things like that to keep corporations that were polluting the environment, kind of keep them on track with what they have to meet requirements and whatnot. And then while I was in my career, I started having trouble with my eyes. And that was its own other tumultuous journey of trying to sort out, well, what is going on here where I would miss some of the quality control that we were doing, and I was unable to actually see a lot of things. And prior to that, I went all the way through college without any challenges. I was driving, and I actually was quite shocked to find out that I was having these problems that were causing me to have car accidents and having, missed pieces of work that I actually thought I was doing a really good job on, and it turned out that I was missing some really important pieces. And
Hmm.
so the challenge of that was first all the unknowns that came from that, which were getting bounced around from doctor to doctor and trying to figure out, well, what what is actually happening. And so after, first the ophthalmologist said, yeah, things are not the same as before, and there's a dramatic difference. Going to a retinal specialist and not knowing, and going to a neurologist and not knowing, and really feeling kind of like a guinea pig and quite untethered because there's this thing that's happening, but nobody can give me any answers. And so luckily, I finally had a second opinion through a retinal specialist who suggested I go to the National Institute of Health in Maryland. And believe me, I was in the South. I was living in Nashville at the time. So that was also kind of a big deal. And luckily, I did get some answers. And ultimately, after going back for many years, because they were checking the progression of some degeneration that was happening in my eyes, ultimately, they identified it as cone rod degeneration, which means the cones are responsible for very central vision and for light dark adaptation and things like that. So that was different. And kind of first being diagnosed and being told, okay, you're going to probably most likely worst case scenario. We know doctors like to give worst case scenarios.
Yep.
Worst case scenario, you will be blind in 3 years. And as a young adult in a career of, for me, was great importance to then say you might go blind, that was pretty shocking. And I know being, for many people, obviously you have a whole podcast on what people can do when they're blind, but not knowing anything, not even ever knowing anyone who was visually impaired, that was quite a terrifying worry, to say the least. And it took quite a while to have me understand that, well, first of all, the doctors may not necessarily know what's going to happen. So probably, I would say, it took me about 2 years to really understand that, well, even if there's unknowns, and even if I do go blind, it'll be okay. But what really brought me to the it'll be okay piece was finding yoga and being able to connect with the fact that there are a lot of things out of our control. And when you're able to pause and to be in a place of simply accepting, and even if it's not easy, to be an acceptance of circumstances. And that again, circumstances of a diagnosis may not define you in a way that is limiting.
Absolutely. Very well said. And I really like just your honesty, your transparency. You know, obviously vision loss itself is challenging, but just determining a diagnosis, like you said, being passed around is challenging as well. So it's almost like a double whammy. And I've interviewed so many folks that have gone through such a similar experience, just trying to get, you know, what's the title of my condition? What do I actually have? What's the prognosis? What's going to happen? It definitely sounds like you had a very similar journey.
Yeah. And again, everybody is different. And whether someone's born blind or they lose their sight from an accident or instantaneously, or it's a long journey to accommodations along the way, it's basically what is the choice of that person and how are they going to move through it, basically. And I've met just incredible people, and all the people that you have interviewed are the amount of steadiness and dedication and perseverance that is within each and every person's journey is remarkable.
No doubt. Yep. And obviously, it's more challenging for some than others, and just
Hmm.
based on circumstances, situations, support systems. But yeah, I've been
Yeah.
super grateful to speak to many folks, including yourself, that have proven it doesn't matter what cards you're dealt, you can still find happiness, find success, find peace, all those great things.
And also to piggyback on that, it's not always a bed of roses.
So
And a
true.
rose is a really good example because the it smells great, it's beautiful, and there are thorns. So there's a piece in every person and in every circumstance that has that juxtaposition of challenge, struggle, sometimes even feeling defeated. And yet there's also the ability to rise above it. And that's what I think is the most important piece. And that's something that I gained from when I was going through my original yoga therapy. Well, I went through a yoga teacher training initially. And in learning about yoga and that kind of aha moment of, okay, even if I don't know what's going to happen to my eyes, and I don't know what's going to happen in my life as far as how can I be a person of success, that finding that really came from the skills that I learned through yoga. And I was a shy person, so it was hard to even think about teaching as a yoga teacher. And that first 200-hour teacher training that I did, it was very intimidating. And I had to get a lot of support around, study partners and other, I didn't know they were accommodations at the time. As I was going through my teacher training, I also had the fortune of finding a local organization called the Center for the Partially Sighted. And they helped provide accommodations and orientation and mobility training and computer accessibility and all those kinds of things that began to give me a sense of that quality of being able to still be involved in the world, where I started to feel like, am I going to be able to still participate? Right. When you don't have enough knowledge about a particular result of when you're given a diagnosis.
Right.
And so in that finding support like that, I also was able to get purpose again through connecting with that particular organization and being involved and having encouragement from them that I have something to offer. So I got very good at talking with people who are also going through a similar loss
Hmm.
and being exposed to all kinds of different eye disorders and different walks of life and things like that. So it gave me a brilliant education on how to support people in their own transition of life, whatever that meant.
Sure, sure. And like you said earlier, not knowing anyone with a visual impairment and then finding a community like this, so powerful.
Yes.
So I know I did mention at the top that you're a certified yoga therapist. So if you just want to explain a little more what that means, and I know yoga instructor is also another title, maybe the differences between the two.
Yes. So lucky for me, I did my very first teacher training and kind of overcame the the challenges of one not being able to see that great, but understanding that I have kind of better senses. So I was using all of me to be able to do that. But as a yoga teacher, you are required to do a minimum of 200 hours. And then once you have your 200 hours, then you can take a little test and then you are eligible to teach. And if you know now, I mean, I would say the majority of people that I've met have been exposed to yoga. Now, the difference between yoga as an instructor and yoga as a yoga therapist, there is a minimum requirement of 1,000 hours of training.
Oh, wow.
And on top of it, as that training goes, there are specifics that might even include clinical work, which is what I ended up doing. I did a clinical internship at a place called the Venice Family Clinic here in Los Angeles. And I spent 5 years working in an integrative medical setup where there weren't just chiropractors and acupuncturists, but there were also yoga therapists included. And so yoga is a very powerful tool, and many people that I meet often say, "Oh, I wish I could do yoga. I'm not flexible enough." Or, "Oh, I can't do yoga. I can't be still." So the design as a yoga therapist is that each person has an individual experience. And we use the tools of yoga, which are five main principles, using not just the physical body, not just the breath, not just the way the mind processes, not just cognitively, but also in the way we have our values and our decision making and all that. And then the greater part of what makes us whole is what we connect to outside of ourselves. And that may be something divine, or that may be something like nature. And sometimes there's a misconception of, oh, yoga, that's a religion, or yoga is for only fit people, because that's what, if you see the media, then that's what you're exposed to. And even if you hear about it, oh yeah, the postures and the way that it's all presented to us is only a tiny, tiny portion of a 5,000-year-old tradition that incorporates how to live to your fullest.
Right, right. Very interesting. So then with all of your experience, I know you did launch Yoga Gently, so definitely curious about your inspiration for starting that business.
Yeah, yoga gently. So keep in mind, when I first started yoga, it was to help me manage the extreme difficulty of losing my sight and kind of losing everything that I was tethered to as my own connection to what I thought my life was going to be like.
Hmm.
And once I lost that, to gain it through a connection of, oh, okay, if I can simply be okay by breathing and by keeping myself connected on a physical level, all of that taught me that what I have to offer is something a little bit different than your typical do 100 sun salutations, or, if you are familiar enough with yoga, to also prevent injury, because a lot of yoga is repetitive, tends to be very fast. And what I found in my own journey of doing yoga, that's what I started with, and I got hurt. And I saw a lot of other people getting injured.
Hmm.
And I really geared myself towards, how can there be a way to approach each and every individual person in a way that is gentle? And not because yoga is challenging, but if you're met with a place of stability and equanimity, then it's a little bit easier to move through life circumstances as well. So the idea that you can transfer the principles of yoga into day-to-day living is kind of one of the most important I would say, missions that I have. And that's where Yoga Gently came from. My deep interest in kind of changing the concept that yoga is too hard and that yoga is only for those fit people. So many of the people that I began working with, oh, yoga gently, I might be able to do that. And so I got really good when prior to learning about yoga therapy and as a yoga therapist, how to approach each and every person individually in a way that might offer them ease through these practices of yoga. So that's what kind of inspired the name and the launch of my private practice. And thanks to COVID, the launch to me being virtually, so that I can outreach not just going to the studios and going to people's homes, but also anybody that might be able to meet me over Zoom.
Right. Definitely one of the benefits of the pandemic that did come out of that.
Yeah, that's one little tiny silver lining.
No doubt. Yep. So then just digging a little bit further, so in terms of the programs that you offer, talk to me about what your offerings, your selection looks like, and also if someone, who is blind or visually impaired were interested in participating, how you might work with that individual.
My programs, most important thing is I work one-on-one so that each person, whoever wants to dive into their own personal program, we create it together. So it depends on what their goals are. It depends on how committed they are. And we design it together. And it requires collaboration and it becomes really fun because they're involved too. Oh, well, maybe someone wants to learn how to meditate, or maybe someone wants to enhance their sports game, or maybe they simply want to build their confidence so that they can walk across the street. Those are all things that we do together through a combination of breath work and simple postures that can develop into more complex routines. And then keeping a real sense of what's important to the mind and the body and how we integrate that. So that's what we create one-on-one. And then I have certain particular focus groups that I work with. And depending on the group, I work with women's wellness and I collaborate with a lot of different groups to create outdoor excursions as well as group activities. And then I, also present. I have quite a bit of presentations on vision loss and how we can manage the stress of that through the tools of yoga. So those are all the kinds of different programming I offer. But to answer your question about specifics around working with an individual or a group that has vision loss, what makes Yoga Gently very different from a typical yoga teacher and even some yoga therapists, some are very good at it, but I think because I have my own personal experience with being in yoga classes and not being able to see, but not be able to understand. So the idea, because most often yoga classes and other yoga programs offer follow along with the teacher.
Right.
So I am incredibly thorough in description, and the particular type of yoga that I've learned and the lineage that I follow is a breath-centered practice. So
Hmm.
each movement is incorporated with the breath, and I'm able to guide them, direct them, and hold the spaciousness for them to move through that, and to be able to, again, especially working one-on-one, individually figure out, okay, well, when I say this, so maybe I say, breathe in and reach your arms up. Maybe if they breathe in and reach their arms up, that hurts their shoulder, or that uh, causes a disorientation, or they lose their balance, things like that. We work together to figure out, how do we accommodate the person's experience.
Sure. It's very personalized, very customized, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yes. And again, everybody's going to be different, and everybody's um, approach might be different. Their fitness level might be different. Their experience in their own bodies might be different, especially understanding how our bodies move in space. If you've never seen how your body moves in space, sometimes that's very challenging. And yet, the other way around, if you only see yourself, sometimes that's also very challenging. So, the idea that I'm fortunate enough to have had both experiences and understand that the difference is an individual experience.
Right, right. Makes sense. So I'm also curious, can you provide any examples, like in general terms, not necessarily using names, but any stories of clients you've had who are blind or visually impaired, or perhaps have other disabilities, and just kind of the positive impact that yoga has had on them?
I had a really amazing woman that I worked with for quite a long time, who is an older woman, and she actually lost her eyesight due to a condition of her blood pressure. And so she lost her eyesight instantly and was really, of course, devastated, but also didn't quite know how to recoup confidence and, uh, I would say, trust in what to do in the surrounding, how to just keep moving. And we worked for a long time as just talking on the phone and trying to kind of sort through, what little steps are we able to take, and go through different circumstances of exploring moving around the house, and then moving out into the neighborhood, and then ultimately being able to navigate and even travel worldwide. And so I was not the only person that was helping her. She had a whole support team because, of course, she had orientation and mobility trainers and other, assistants outside of that. But to be able to move like that, from being terrified to leave the house to being able to go and explore, in international European travel, that for me was a beautiful exchange with this client, and also an incredible thing to witness, to be able to be in the experience of, and to be inspired by the fact that that can shift. You can go from the belief of nothing's possible to the belief of moving through life with full encouragement and optimism and adventurous, being adventurous. So.
Sure. I appreciate you sharing that story. What a great testimony, from that individual. And just goes to show the power of, getting involved in something, whether it is sports, yoga, any kind of activity, any kind of community, and where that could potentially lead.
And because we're talking about sports, I mean, your whole mission is eyes on sports. And I'm so fortunate to be able to have experienced a lot of outdoor activities and sports. And I've tried a lot of different ones and think, from skiing to bike riding to, of course, I have to be on a tandem bike, which is a whole other experience.
Yep.
And then, you know, rock climbing and hiking and biking of, all these other being out on the ocean and paddleboarding and things like that. Just a way to deeply connect with something that is possible with the idea that nature can be a real mental health boost. And then when you have connections to other people that you are working around or working with or communicating with, because when you are needing the guidance of someone who is sighted, like on a tandem bike or in other experiences, like when I was skiing, that the relationship that you have to that person is really important. And the relationship to your own physical well-being is important. And all of those things build to provide that piece of embracing life fully.
Absolutely. Very well said. I did want to give a shout out to the Blind Stokers Club. I've had some of their members on this podcast and have connected with several of them virtually as well. And I
Yes.
believe you've made a connection with that group. Just talk to me about your experience with them. And I think you've done some of the virtual spins, right?
Yes. And again, thank goodness for Zoom because as someone who lives in Los Angeles and Blind Strokers Club is based in San Diego, it's very difficult for me to get there. So I actually have never been on a ride. My goal is to get there. I
Yeah.
haven't done that yet. And their community is so big and they have such wonderful participants that are dedicated to bringing the joy of tandem cycling to those of us who are stokers that cannot do the piloting or the captaining of the bike. And many years ago, I got introduced to the Blind Stokers Club and just signed up on their mailing list. And then luckily, there's a lovely woman named Barbara Shaker, and I think she even goes by Barbara. And she does a Saturday spin sometimes. And so I joined that with my little peddler because I don't even at the moment don't even have a stationary bike. I wanted to get involved, and so I started pedaling with them and got to know them very well. And again, it's a place where there's encouragement and connection. And so that's how we ended up meeting, you and I. And I, and there's just so much appreciation I have for the commitment to reaching out to us and the luxury of having to be able to be on Zoom. I mean, that really helped a lot for me. They go on amazing rides, and
Absolutely.
I hope to be a part of it at some point.
No doubt, yeah. And I know they've done, a lot of events in Southern California, but also across the country, different adventures and whatnot. So definitely a great organization. And yeah, we certainly owe technology a lot of gratitude these days because of the
Mhm.
connections we can make through it.
Well, and there's the ebb and the flow of life, right? There's the good and the bad with all. We
Yep.
just need to appreciate what's good and kind of navigate the tough spots of the challenges of. I know for me, I'm learning the skills of using the technology. It can be really difficult, and it even can sometimes feel insurmountable. But it's important to keep trying no matter what.
True. Yeah. And also just, the fact technology changes so fast and things move on the screen. And if, you're a screen reader user, that presents a whole nother challenge. So,
Yes, yes.
so then before we do wrap up here, definitely wanted to give you the chance to share contact info if anyone is interested in getting involved in Yoga Gently, or at least learning more about your programs. How can folks get in touch?
Aw, thank you so much. So I'm at Yoga Gently, YOGAGENTLY, and you can find that on the web, www.yogagently.com, and join the newsletter so you can find out what's happening and how you might be able to participate in some of the classes and the workshops and one-on-one, most importantly. So if you want to do that with me, that would be wonderful. I look forward to hearing from you. And thanks again, Greg, for this wonderful opportunity to be with you again.
Yes, absolutely. Again, we've been chatting with Sonya Chapnick here on Eyes Free Sports, and really, really appreciate the time. I really appreciated just sharing your journey, your story, and a lot of powerful kind of, anecdotes and thought-provoking things that you mentioned here. So thank you so much for everything, Sonya.
Thank you, and take good care and keep doing all the great work that you're doing. I really appreciate hearing all that you're involved with and all that you offer. So thanks again.
To hear more episodes of the Eyes Free Sports podcast and to subscribe, search for Eyes Free Sports on your favorite podcast platform or visit eyesfreesports.com. Be sure to follow the Eyes Free Sports podcast at facebook.com/eyesfreesports and on Twitter at Eyes Free Sports.